Well, good morning, everybody, and good evening if you're in London, as it is evening time for Shane Connolly, our special guest today. I'm Deborah Prinzing, founder of the Slow Flower Society. This is our first back to school session of the Slow Flowers member meetup. We take the summer off, so we are thrilled that September is kicking off with a very special guest. And we're going to we meet Shane Connolly and talk with him about his work and preview a little bit of what's going to happen when he comes and teaches and lectures in Seattle at the end of September. Just a little housekeeping. We have some giveaways today. And so if you want to make sure that you have your name appearing as, first and last name and your business on your bio in the chat, that would be great. You also can jump in and say hello in the chat and maybe add your Instagram account. So Tonley, our membership manager, can make sure to check you out and say hello. And, we'll have everyone on mute, and we are going to have time for questions with Shane. So please add your questions into the chat, and Tonley will gather those, and we'll have a lovely time to run as many of them past him as possible. As many of you know, if you're a member, you're receiving our emails. And if follow us on social media, you've probably seen Slow Flowers had a very special opportunity to do a live event, 3 days of live events with Shane Connolly in Seattle. And I'll just give you a little preview of that. Shane will be giving a lecture on Friday, September 29th at St. Mark's Cathedral in Seattle, which is a spacious, gorgeous cathedral. And it's really fitting because Shane and his, I think your wife, Candy, did you start the Sustainable Church Flowers movement, Shane, or you?
I said I didn't want to have as much to do with it because I wouldn't have time. So Candy and two others do more of the work. I'm the glamorous side of it,
You're the celebrity spokesman. I get no. I mean, you're. It's lovely. So we're in a church setting, so that'll be really amazing to see what you design, and then that event will also have a book signing. So that's really going to be the public event. I think 150 people have ordered tickets, so we're going to have lots of room to add more. We've got all month to keep promoting that. We have 2 full day workshops with Shane. One is on Saturday, the 30th of September. That is sold out. The one on Sunday, October 1st, only has 2 spaces left. So it's a small, intimate group. Shane prefers to teach only 12 to 15 students at a time. So we have a few people commenting that they're excited to come to the workshop with you. So we've got a really good group. And I know you have a whirlwind month, Shane. So before we dive in, I want to just say hello and ask you how are things going in the world of Shane Connolly and Company?
Well, it doesn't stop, I have to say. But no, I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky. I had a significant birthday this year, and I thought, is it time to slow down maybe? But I don't seem to. Slow Flowers and Slow Shane are 2 different things, obviously.
I know that's the irony. We talk about slow, but we can't slow ourselves down. So, but your approach is we're following in your footsteps, and we believe that what you've done in harmony with nature is really what a Slow Flowers community emulates. And
well, your book was one of the seismic moments for me. So, don't underestimate who's following whose footsteps. I think sometimes in the early days of sustainability, we didn't know the word really. We didn't really use it. We just knew that something wasn't quite right. And I think so few people were doing what you were trying to do that it seemed not wrong exactly, but it seemed hard to be always on an upward trajectory. And I remember your book and seeing it in the New York Flower School. I'm thinking, wow, that's putting it into words. Wonderful. So
I'm sure. Well, that makes me so happy to hear. And I'm sure that you're so often asked to describe your philosophy and your aesthetic. And, you've run your own sort of eponymous studio for so long. How do you you have the alchemy reference on your website, which I love. But talk a little bit about, like, if you were to describe Shane Connolly and Company and your studio, which encompasses a lot of people besides you. How do you like to put it into words?
It doesn't encompass a lot of people besides me. That's the joy of it. I almost became a bigger business in the sort of 2011, 2013, 14, that sort of time. And I wasn't comfortable with it because for so many reasons, you can't actually, do what you want to do. If it becomes too big, you end up being the person who goes to meetings and the person who takes notes and the person who sends emails and a PA who tells you what to do and when you have to do it. And suddenly it gets too much. And actually COVID, in that point of view, it closed all of us down completely, but it closed us down and made me rethink. And so earlier this year, we sold the big industrial unit and moved to this shed in a garden. It's not quite a shed.
Oh my gosh. So, well, I got to visit you at your industrial space in 2019. It was kind of in a industrial warehousey district. With other kind of, I feel like auto body shops or something down the street. I could be wrong.
There's one auto body shop. There was a theater next door. We've got there were arts represented, but
oh, good. Well, you needed the space. Obviously, you have a lot of props to store and that sort of thing. But tell us about this new space and how did it come to be? And maybe we can get a little sneak peek with your camera.
With my computer.
Yeah.
I knew about this place since 1990. Well, we have lived in the same area for a very long time. And in 1998, this place came up for sale. And I saw it. And by the time I thought about it and thought I couldn't afford it, someone else had bought it. So since 1998, I have been looking at this place. The person who bought it sadly died, and her wife didn't feel happy to sell it for about 8 years after her death. And then it came up for sale again. And that was just after all the COVID things and really the reevaluation. And so we bought it.
And you said it's a little shed. Is it like a freestanding building?
Right. It's an old studio. You can see through the window there.
Lovely. Oh.
So that's the studio bit. And then we built on this sort of lean-to at the back. And we brought, you might remember these crystal windows from our old big studio. We brought those.
How lovely.
And it looks out into a little garden with a quince tree, an apple tree, a plum tree, and a damson tree, and an oak tree, which is amazing in central London.
Right. Now, Shane, is this a space where you can teach workshops, or is it really just your working production studio?
I haven't done much teaching again in my own space. I much prefer teaching with other people like I'm doing with you, because I don't have to worry what they're having for lunch. The sandwich, it's not my problem.
We'll get your order. Well, I should just mention the reason this worked out so well for you to come to the West Coast of the US is that you were already booked to be part of the Sustainable Flowers Workshop, which our friends and Slow Flowers members Becky Feasby and TJ McGrath are producing. Like in week 3 of September, I think the dates are like the 24th to 26th.
Yes, exactly that. Exactly.
Okay. And that's in New Jersey, but it's sort of the greater New York metro area. And you'll be teaching with some amazing instructors. So I think that's sold out.
It is, yes. And incredibly, 7 of the spaces are BIPOC scholarship students. So that is wonderful, because it is one of the things, you go and do these things and people who can afford to do them. But sometimes you worry that actually that's missing out on people who need them. Yeah. So those 7 BIPOC things, that's
designers.
Yes, exactly.
That's wonderful. It's too close to you being in Seattle for me to come out, even though they've invited me to come to the big dinner on Monday night. But I'll just wait.
Cooking cakes and
I'll wait. I'll wait to arrive in Seattle on the Wednesday the 27th, and then it'll be a whirlwind. So that's a lot of teaching for you and a lot of travel. That's almost 2 weeks of being away from the studio. So that's probably huge.
I thought you were in Washington, D.C. I've got no clue about the geography of America. So
oh my goodness, that's okay.
And when you told me about the 8-hour flight, I was thinking, where? Why? What am I doing?
Well, but I'm very excited that a friend of Slow Flowers is going to be out of town and has donated her luxury houseboat on Lake Union for you to stay in. So it'll be, if you remember the Meg Ryan movie Sleepless in Seattle, that's going to be your own little Sleepless in Seattle experience.
I better get a wig.
Yeah. So if somebody in the chat just said, we in the US have no clue about the geography of the UK. So we're even, and no geography.
But it's
test.
smaller. We don't have 8-hour flights. We are very small.
I know, right? I've always,
1 hour.
well, at least, yeah, we'll try to make it worth your while.
I'm so looking forward to it. It absolutely doesn't matter. It was just funny, and I looked at it and I thought, hold on, that's not where I thought it was.
Oh my goodness. I guess I should have sent you a map. Well, we'll have a welcome kit with all kinds of Seattle swag for you. Just to, make it official. Well, let's talk about some of the highlights of what's happening, has been happening for you. You have this beautiful new studio.
It is.
Lovely. And congratulations. I feel like this is your forever studio now, right?
See how long I last. I mean, it is. And it's the joy. We've got these windows open, onto the garden. I can hear birds singing, and I'm in central London. It's a really hot day. We're having a heat wave in London. Ugh. Typically, Europe had their heat wave in the summer. We have ours in September when we don't want.
Yeah.
But I can open windows at the front and the back, and the breeze blows through, and the birds are singing. And a train's about to go past, which is not quite so nice, but it's so much better working here. We love it.
That's great. Well, it's an interesting arc of the last year, because it was just about at the end of September, I believe, when the Queen Elizabeth died. And
she died today. This is the first year of this is her anniversary today.
Oh my gosh, Shane. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Well,
today. What did that mean for you? If you feel comfortable telling us, your role in honoring that amazing passing.
Well, all I will say is that I felt I had to be here to be of use in any way I could be of use. So then I cancelled my trip to you and to
Becky,
to Becky and TJ, and everyone was very kind and understanding and yeah. So yes, it was a bit of a whirlwind of a few weeks, but these things only happen once in your lifetime. You have to be, any client who is a good client you are loyal to, and you need to be there when you're needed. Simple as that.
Well, I think that the photo that was most widely seen around the world was the funeral the casket spray or wreath, I guess, that you were credited with designing, and even the news media picked up on the fact that it was all local botanicals and no floral foam, and that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, pretty amazing. I mean, yeah, I don't feel very comfortable talking about it, because it is, it's the most private thing you could do for someone.
Sure.
It was for someone's mother. It wasn't for the Queen of England.
That's so true. Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was the greatest honor to do, but it wasn't. I didn't look on it as a career thing. It was an honor. That basically that's what it was, and I wouldn't have had any other way of doing anything except foam free, and flowers from someone's garden was what it was. It was from the King's garden and from the palace. So it was it was completely for her as a human rather than her as a queen. And I think that was why it was touching, probably. That wasn't the intention. The intention wasn't to make people touched. It was for the family.
Right.
And I think isn't that always the thing in those, there is so much in these big occasions with anyone, there is the human, and that's often forgotten, and everyone's supposed to sort of be stiff-lipped and behave in a superhero way. And that's not maybe how they feel.
Well, it goes back to the language of flowers, and that so much can be said through, when you can't speak words. And that was really lovely.
Flowers do that for all occasions if you're thoughtful about them. And I don't mean even thoughtful in the varieties. I just mean, flowers. We were using things yesterday, which are from one of my organic growers, and they're just so seasonal and so organic and so perfect and beautiful and imperfect. And there's a different feel to it completely. people go in and say, "Oh wow, that scent is amazing. Oh, gosh, what's that?" Whereas with impressive flowers, all that's lost, isn't it?
Right.
Sort of another. It's a different emotion that's evoked.
It's so true, and I think that we all have these. Not, I would hope we all have. Many people have these sort of nature memories that are associated with a fragrance or a particular flower or tree or shrub. Absolutely. That brings it back. You mentioned working with an organic grower. When you most recently, this past May, were involved with the amazing flowers for the coronation of King Charles, you worked with a huge collection of British flower growers.
I know.
And I'd love to talk a little bit about your collaboration with Flowers from the Farm, which is sort of the Slow Flowers corollary in the UK, started by Gillian Hodgson, who we've had on the podcast and who I've visited in person. And I think the two of you are kindred spirits. You kind of collaborated on this.
We're very fond of each other. And I mean, I curated an exhibition about the great Constance Spry in 2021 at the Garden Museum. And if any of you are interested to find out more about Constance Spry, go to the Garden Museum website, Garden Museum London, and there are several video resources about the exhibition and about her and about people who knew her. And I mean, an extraordinary person, but an even more extraordinary woman to do the things she was doing she started in 1929, age 43. I mean, women didn't do that sort of thing. But her finest hour was the coronation of the Queen, in the late Queen in 1953. So I'd done a lot of research for the exhibition about Constance and the coronation of the Queen. And one of her big things was that the flowers all came from the Commonwealth countries. Oh, so,
wow.
I mean, that would have been so not right today to have, for every reason, for the Commonwealth to send flowers. But I had that idea in my head and I thought, what about if all the flowers came from the kingdom, for want of a better Disney-like title, from all corners of the United Kingdom? And so I spoke with Jill first of all, because I thought if it's a really bad idea, she'll tell me, because she's a very good northern sort of, she tells a spade as a spade. And I thought I'll ask her first and see what she thinks, and she was absolutely on it. Immediately signed on the dotted line. And they had that. I mean, Flowers from the Farm is an extraordinary organization, but a lot of people use them in a very local way. So someone who grows in Yorkshire produces flowers which are sold in Yorkshire for Yorkshire designers to use on Yorkshire events, and the same for the rest of the country. But to show what they could do in a united way, and to show what people can do when they get together, I mean, it's pretty extraordinary. It's insane, really. And they were able to produce these flowers from all corners of the United Kingdom and get them to me, for me and the team to put in buckets of water in Westminster Abbey.
Well, and the thing is, it was spring, so the palette was very seasonal. You had a lot of spring ephemerals and flowering branches and all. Were you able to even have a palette? I mean, the amount of flowers at Westminster Abbey were mind-blowing.
We had color palette.
Okay.
But that's all. And that's all I ever specified. I mean, when I'm there giving my talks, I'll show you the color mood board that Flowers from the Farm had. The major players saw, just for reference, but nobody knew what exact flowers there would be. And that is how slow flowers work.
Right.
You can't guarantee a flower. You shouldn't guarantee a flower. You can guarantee colors, and then you go to your growers and say, it has to be all shades of pink. It has to be all shades of blue and yellow and orange. And they bring their best to it then. And that's exactly what the coronation was. We decided a palette. Everybody agreed that it was the right one. And Flowers from the Farm and the RHS, the two collaborations, which were life-changing.
So the RHS has how many botanical gardens across England?
It has 5 botanical gardens across the British Isles. And they supplied the huge stuff, the big branches of flowering malus, the azaleas and rhododendron. I mean, that was that was the perfect time of year for those. And again, we were very lucky, but if they hadn't been a flower, something else would have been beautiful.
Sure. But it was so symbolic to have their involvement as well.
Oh, well, it was incredible because we had branches cut from beech trees that had been planted by the late Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh in the 1950s. So branches of trees that they had planted were at their son's coronation. Oh. We had blossom from a tree that Queen Victoria planted. And it's all those sorts of connections. And to me, that changes. Those things are game changers. And they're not just for important people, they're for everybody. They're game changers to be able to plant something after a wedding, or to have flowers from a funeral given to friends, and plants that they can do something positive with. To me, I try to do that in all I do.
Yeah, that the story is as important as the beautiful production.
Absolutely.
I love that. Wow, I did not know about all those threads going back to Queen Victoria. Remarkable. And Shane, just on a logistics point of view, how much time did you have to execute this? I mean, things are perishable. You don't have, big walk-in coolers, right?
We don't. I mean, I don't believe in walk-in coolers, to be honest. We're having a heat wave at the moment, and we've got a bit of a fan in the room where we keep the flowers, which is sort of through there. And I sometimes think people get the flowers to such a cool stage, they then bring them into the heat and they all die immediately. There's a happy medium. So we certainly didn't have coolers. It wasn't, we had a few hot days in the lead up, but then it poured with rain on the day, as you know, it was freezing cold. That was all fine for the flowers.
Well, it's England, right?
Yeah, really, all in the one day. So that logistically, with all these things, you have to be very obedient. There's no point in being the person who runs late or the person who makes things difficult. You have to smile and say, of course, to everyone who says, oh, you can't go in for another 15 minutes. And, the policeman who says, I need to examine that again. You have to say, of course, what can we do to help you?
Oh, my goodness.
So there's an awful lot of suppression. But I think we have to be like that as professionals a lot of the time anyway. Nobody needs to know that you're having a tough time.
Right.
You really don't. And it wasn't, believe me, it wasn't. It was absolutely, once the flowers were all in the Abbey, we had an amazing room, sort of from the 12th century, which was really cold. And that's where we were based. Then we were sort of stuck there. We would have periods of 4 hours where we couldn't do anything because there was a rehearsal, and we would sort of have to sit in our room eating sandwiches and drinking coffee and chatting. And then we would have 2 hours of frantic activity. And then we would be back to an hour and a half where we couldn't go into the Abbey again. So we were on site. We went home at nights, obviously. And it all, because we were so beautifully timetabled and we'd thought through everything in advance, that sounds big-headed, but we really had, as we would with any event.
Sure.
And, we would want to appear professional if we were doing your birthday party too. You don't want to turn up and have forgotten this and that. So everything is taken care of, and it's all on a spreadsheet. And so you could look at the spreadsheet and say, okay, at 2:00, we have to do this and this. And then at 4:00, let's water the ones at the front to make sure they're looking all right. And, and always overestimate, always say, okay, we'll need 2 hours to do that when it'll be done in an hour.
Wow.
And then you can do it calmly.
So the installation, you mainly rely on the on floral designers and like freelancers, or did you use some of the flower farmers themselves to help?
We had one flower farmer and one person who works for the RHS who had helped cut the material. And I mean, we just wanted, it would have been impossible to have everybody who was involved there, of course.
Sure.
But we wanted somebody who could go back and say, you'll never guess where your sweet peas ended up, or you'll never guess where that branch of blossom, did you see it? Because it was so special and historic that you wanted people to realize how much they were appreciated.
Lovely.
And I think that's very important, really, to make people feel, and also to not step on the toes of people who work all the time in somewhere like Westminster Abbey, that you don't upset the barrel.
Oh my goodness. Well, just talk briefly before we move on about the mechanics, because at the front of Westminster Abbey, there's this very tall, wooden, beautiful, intricate wall, and the flowers were on the top of that. And I'm not using the right terms, I'm sure. But what is it? The high altar? Yes.
High altar, yeah. And there's an incredible backdrop to the high altar, which is all mosaic. There's a pavement which is a 15th century Cosmati mosaic, which can't have water spilt on it. It's got all these extraordinary things. And we used a row of, we had a trough made about that narrow. Well, I don't know what that is, 40 centimeters, whatever that is, the whole way along, and buckets that were absolutely edge to edge.
They just they dropped right down into that channel.
Right down, so they couldn't, there was no wobble factor for them. Then they were filled with water. We used birch as a sort of basis. So we put birch in with its branches, sticking together. And then we put in these great big 10-foot branches of azaleas and 10-foot blossom branches. And I didn't go up the ladder. It was all done from behind by two of my team who had to wear, they had to be hooked on to things, sort of kit harnesses.
They scaffold themselves up there, right?
They went up a ladder, and then there were two more passing things up, and another two bringing things in bucket at a time, so that there was no danger of water spilling. And then I stood at the front and sort of said, no, over a bit, left a bit, right a bit. That's how it went together. And it was buckets of water.
Well, that's the thing I've noticed about in hearing you in interviews and reading interviews, that people want to know your mechanic preferences.
It's so disappointing.
You are so basic.
I am so basic. Someone once said to me, all you do is put flowers in water. She meant it rudely. And I thought, actually, that's right. And I'm perfectly happy. Perfectly happy to take.
You're like, you can't insult me with that, Barb.
No, I said, okay, I'm happy with that. Yes. And she was implying that I wasn't a designer, that I just put flowers in water.
Right. I had a journalist say to me once, you're just a glorified stenographer. And I'm like, okay, well, thank you for that. I guess that's all I do is write down what other people say. So it's the sort of distilled down to the simplest act. So it's okay. Well, congratulations. That is one for the history books, Shane. And the symbolism of honoring a coronation with flowers across, grown by British farmers and harvested from British gardens. I mean, what a story to tell. And I hope it influences people's awareness of local flowers in their own corner of the UK.
Hope so. I mean, like all these things, the press don't pick up on that sort of story. They would pick up if all the flowers came from the Bahamas or there was a price. That's what the other thing, they hadn't got a price tag, those sorts of flowers.
Oh,
whereas
right.
if it had been orchids and roses that were flown in from Colombia, someone would have said, hold on, this is extravagant. It's very interesting how the press go for the negative.
Yeah.
And so they didn't really pick up. I hope it influences. I mean, I'm certainly talking about it. So
yes. Well, we're grateful to hear a little bit about the backstory, and I know you'll talk about what you're able to talk about when you lecture here. I do think that it was a lovely gesture from the flower farmers and the Royal Horticultural Society. This was really not about money. This was about loving their king and queen.
But also, someone who has done so much for sustainability and for British grown, from the 1960s, he has been speaking out about the need to be local and seasonal. And it was, it was a bit of a thank you from all the people who, it was very special.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Lovely. Well, you have an upcoming lecture at the Garden Museum, and I'm going to join virtually, and it's called Flowers for the Coronation. So
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Some people may not know about the Garden Museum. I've been able to go twice. It's in an old church, right? In London, right?
Yeah. It's an amazing place. I sort of think of it as my club in London, and it has a very interesting collection. Obviously, it's one of the few museums that can't contain the thing it purports to be about. It can't have a garden in it. It is set around a courtyard that has been designed by a great garden designer called Dan Pearson.
Oh,
and
yes.
It's so beautiful. It's got a wonderful restaurant. which only uses seasonal local produce. It's on the river. It's beside the Houses of Parliament and Lambeth Palace, and you can climb up the ancient tower and see London amazingly. Such a brilliant view of London. But the real joy of it is that it gathers kindred spirits and people who have a connection with nature. I mean, gardens are a byproduct of nature, or nature is a byproduct of gardens, and that's what's so special about that place. And it's got great online, free
education.
Online things. If any of you want to go on, I think you said Deborah, you would put a link to my talk, which isn't free, sadly.
Yes, but Karen just put it in the chat. It's £10, Shane. Yeah. It's the equivalent of $12.50. It's worth it to me to do that. Pardon?
2 coffees and a croissant.
Right. Well, I'm on the mailing list, and every single month there's so much programming, and I feel like the Garden Museum is so special. I'd love to see something like that in the US. So probably will never happen, but there's a sense of history. And then the contemporary of, and I feel like some of the current programming is looking at all of the, the gardeners from around the world who've made their way to England and now are bringing their diaspora to British gardening. And I love that.
It addresses so many things. It has the Garden Museum has an amazing director called Christopher Woodward, who is a mind that is so incredible. You never know quite where Christopher's mind is going to go, and eloquent into the bargain, and charming. And he could ask you to come and talk, and you'd find you were on a plane. He brings the most interesting people together. Yeah. And it's all available. Since COVID, it's now all available online as well. So, if you are a designer, some of the things, one of the most extraordinary talks I've ever been to at the Garden Museum was by a man called Ptolemy Dean, who is an architect. And he was talking about how he approached building the one extension to Westminster Abbey, the only thing that had been put on the Abbey in 500 years. Wow. He was amazing, talking about design, which applies to everyone. When flower designers say, I'm a designer, you think, are you? Do you know the process?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you someone who can churn out what you've seen before? And that is not design.
Well, the discipline of design shows up in so many, like you said, architecture. It's not just fashion. There's just so many ways that it can be interpreted.
Ways. And so many potential collaborations. I always think food is the much more natural brother or sister of floristry than fashion industry.
Well, I just have to say, the cover of your book, A Year in Flowers, which I'm going to hold up here, is all about food. Look at this beautiful vessel that's filled with, I'm sorry, I can't do this backwards, but all these tomatoes are, adorning this installation, Shane. You use food a lot. I love that.
I think we love to use.
No, they're not tomatoes. They're cherries. I'm sorry.
I thought they were cherries, but
cherries and grapes.
we love that.
It could be tomatoes.
We love that sort of produce of nature approach, and we use growing things an awful lot in our designs, and we use fruit and vegetables, dead things, live things. It's sort of, Constance Spry used to say that she loved to start off at the compost heap when she went to somebody's house, just to see what she could find, because sometimes leaves that are just drying out, absolutely, they're the thing that can calm down the peachy rose and make it look beautiful without looking saccharine. It's very, looking at nature is so interesting.
I love that. And Shane, that makes me understand why you asked, when you said, when you come to Seattle, you want to go, we're going to take you to the Arboretum they've generously said that they will share some of the prunings and cuttings, but all those things will be in the compost heap before you get there. And now I understand why you're interested in that.
Yeah. And sometimes that also provides you with a very good, if you're arranging in a bowl of some sort, sometimes all you need is a big heavy branch to get in there first that really balances and holds itself, and then you can stick things around it, and it's almost like ikebana but without any of the principles of ikebana. Mm-hmm. And you can find a way to make your own technique, your own sort of structure.
That's interesting. The other thing that I feel like I'm excited you're going to demonstrate at the lecture at St. Mark's is the kind of your definition of approaching tablescaping. And you're not going to do a whole setup, but you have this wonderful, gentle, light hand of doing small pieces on a table that are grouped together. And could you talk a little bit about how you approach that, say maybe for a long table at the Victoria and Albert Museum? We've seen those photos.
Tables. We love long tables. We prefer long tables to round tables. For every reason. I think if you're at a long table, you feel very special and you feel like you're involved. Whereas if you're at table 15 and the host is at table 1, you think, wow, they're not maybe such a good friend as I thought. I always think if you're at one table or two, it's really special. And what one tries to find words for these things. We call it arranging botanically, which is completely plucked out of ether, but it is looking at a container and saying what would be beautiful in that container, or it's looking at a flower and saying what container would you look beautiful in. It's not filling them. It's not saying, it's not when you've got that sort of container only, you sometimes end up just making a blob of flower. Whereas when you've got something that actually holds, I should have something here to demonstrate. If you've got something that actually holds it, it can be exquisite rather than purely beautiful.
Mm-hmm. I'll pull up a photo that you've shared with me while we're talking, so we can show it to folks. But yeah, you're also able to showcase so many botanical elements that way.
Yes. And you can have a bowl. I mean, we did on Instagram, you'll see it yesterday, we did flower. Robert Keim was an extraordinary interior decorator whose ethos was very similar to mine, and he died last year. And his house contents are being auctioned, and we did flowers at the auction house for the preview of that. And one of my favorite things was an ancient blue and white china bowl on a very patterned fabric filled with quinces. And sometimes that's all you need. Wow. I mean, I'm not talking about a wedding. I'm talking about, flowers for a house. Yes, exactly. I mean,
here's an example of one of, I love this.
I did too.
I didn't mean to cut you off. So Shane, this is like some roses and some seasonal, maybe dahlias.
Sweet William. No, it's roses, Sweet William. I think maybe was a peony or two, the dark color would be a peony, and the seed heads of honesty, Lunularia.
Right here.
That's that sort of, and it's been able to put the odd thing, something that people say, what on earth is that? Rather than just roses.
Right. Oh my goodness.
Or dahlias, or just having that one or two things that make you think.
Well, it's so translucent too. Like the viewers across from each other at that dining table can still enjoy themselves in a conversation. I love that.
I mean, I think to us that's what a tablescape is. That it's not just making something that's beautiful, but it's making something that is conversationally happy. That is, what is that flower in the middle? Oh my goodness, it's bride's blossom. That sort of thing. Is that the Philadelphus? That scent is incredible. It's that sort of effect.
Yeah.
Where people are stimulated by the flowers rather than just impressed.
Well, it's so impactful, but it's not like a massive centerpiece that dominates. It's just in harmony with the space, I think, too.
Well, I do sometimes think when I see some of the things on television, on social media, when I see some things that florists do, they do look a bit like sausages. I always say it's a floral sausage. When you see a thing that goes all the way along a table and then down on the floor and then back up another table and finds itself around a staircase.
Oh my goodness.
What is it saying? I would love to understand. I mean, from a design point of view, I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I don't understand it.
It's not less is more, because you do very large scale impactful installations, but there's it's just like what you would see in nature. There's spaces between the trees, or
and let the breeze come through. And if there's something really special, you don't want it wedged in with everything else. An extraordinary. We had some incredibly beautiful tulips earlier this year from one of the great growers in Britain, Polly Nicholson, and you don't want those wedged into a thing that you can't see them. You want to see the stem and the shape and the whole sensuality of it, if you want.
Yeah, I mean, people are craving nature, and they're at some gala function in London, and you're giving them a little lifeline to nature through that installation.
And sometimes it isn't less is more, but sometimes too much is too much. And it's lovely. Of course, it's wonderful to branches and wonderful things sometimes. Or, I mean, how do we sustain that? Is it worth the cost to the earth to fill a wall with flowers solidly and 7 sausages going up a table and down another's? I'm not sure it is. And I'm not sure it gives the right message about what we think about the earth either.
Right. It goes back to your comment earlier, which I meant to ask you elaborate on a little bit, where your use of live plants and live trees and shrubs when you can, because it gives this afterlife to the expense of an event.
Yes, we love it. I mean, and it's something I've always done. It isn't, I sometimes feel a bit of a cheat when people say about sort of sustainability and that I'm exemplary or whatever, because this was always the way I like to do things, right from the start. And I suppose it's because I always loved gardening, and that is my sort of release pill to go into the garden. So for me, growing things is obvious, and that a client can have even the simplest of simple pots of heather or something that we use, that they can have that afterwards. We also are able to support several charities with plants, charities who, if a client doesn't really want them or need them, charities where they beautify bits of London which would never be beautified. And there's another charity who grow things for medicinal uses. And just to give something an afterlife and another to its story. And growing things are delightful for that. Delight transforms. You
worked with a charity after the coronation to find a home for all those flowers, I understand.
Yes. Floral Angels. Floral Angels are angels. It's a volunteers who they call it repurposing flowers, and they take flowers after events. They brought flowers after events, and they bring them they make them into smaller bunches in actually quite small containers, and they bring them to hospices, homes for the elderly. To me, the most touching, homes for abused wives. Actually, flowers are something that haven't featured in their life. They've not been given flowers. They've been given bunches. And to be given a bunch of flowers is actually extraordinary. We forget. We get them all the time, and they're all around us, and we work with them, and we take for granted the impact that can have on someone's self-esteem and morale to be given a simple bunch of flowers. So after the coronation, they took all the flowers, and I think about 20 of them, more people worked on the repurposing than worked on the initial thing, I think.
Oh my goodness.
And they brought them to hospices associated with the king and queen, some of their patronages. They brought them to amazing places where they were able to, they probably kept them far longer than we might have done. That was the other thing. We're so fussy, we throw things out when they wilt, and they probably kept them for weeks and weeks.
I love it. And that continues that thread of the story far longer than that one epic day. I love it. When we get into the Q&A, which we're about ready to transition to, we have one of our friends on the line who runs a business or organization like Floral Angels in Washington, D.C. And I'd love to have her just say hello to you. Are you comfortable if we move into just a little bit of Q&A with our participants? Okay. I wonder if Kaifa, would you be willing to come on and say hello to Shane and tell him what you do with Plants and Blooms Reimagined? Karen will have to maybe put you on we're putting her on the spot. She doesn't know I'm going to do this. And I don't know if she's on. She might have jumped off. Oh, here she is. All right. Well, we'll see if we can get Kaifa to come on and say hello. Tonley, are there other questions that that you've gotten in the chat that you can pose for Shane to perhaps address? I know a lot of comments have been in the chat.
Yeah, I think you've been kind of just blowing our minds. Everybody is so many less questions than usual, honestly.
No, that's
Um,
terrible.
Well, I loved seeing what the note from Joan Thorndike. Joan, maybe you can tell Shane your story about your learning about Constance Spry as a young girl.
Hello, Shane. Thank you so much
Hello,
for
Joan.
this
Hello.
amazing lecture. I was raised in Chile, in Santiago, Chile.
Ah,
My mother was Australian and my father was English, and they moved to Chile in the late 40s and remained there for the rest of their lives. My mother was a great admirer um, of
Constance.
Constance Spry, and in fact, my father smuggled a rose, Constance Spry rose, to Chile so that she could have
Ah,
it in a pot. And when I said that I now live in the United States, or I have for a long time, and when I said I wanted to grow flowers, and because I had little children, that they would be organic, most certainly,
mm,
um, so that I could teach our community that flowers um, are a spiritual experience. They're not something that comes in a box.
yeah,
That's just an
yeah,
object.
yeah.
So my mother shipped me her very tattered copy of Doing the Flowers.
Did
And
she? Gosh.
yes. And then I remembered that when we were children, she always had flowers in the house of whatever she found outside.
Mine too.
As a family, we drew a line at the one Christmas because Christmas in Chile is in the summer.
Oh, ah,
Mm,
And
that's
so
great.
she used some branches, and we said, no, it really merits a tree.
oh,
Thank you, Joan. That's wonderful.
lovely
Wonderful.
to meet you, Joan.
Thank you.
Kaifa, I see you're on your camera now. Can you tell
Yes.
Shane a little bit about your organization? I think he would love to hear about it.
Hello.
Well, hello, Shane, and
Hello.
just an amazing, amazing sharing. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yes, of course, Deborah is my heart. She was one of the first to highlight my work as a part of Slow Flowers Conference in DC. What was that, 2017, I think, Deborah?
2018, I think.
2018.
Yeah.
And I do a similar thing as the Floral Angels there. My team is always busy post events. We are the ones that are out there at 11:30 and 12 o'clock at night and in the morning, recapturing the flowers. And as you said, Shane, we are able to extend them. Those that are
Yeah.
seemingly wilting a little bit, we are able to extend their life and their beauty and get them to many, 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 many people that, as you shared,
Yeah.
would
That's what
otherwise
they're
not
for.
receive the flowers. Yes, that is who they're for. And we also do therapeutic programming where we actually go mental health. I have a mental health client that works with both recovery and mental health individuals and do actual flower arranging and plant-based experiences. So
Wow.
all right now I'm in my studio. I don't know. Let me see if I can show you all. I don't, you all may know Philippa Tarrant of Flowers 38 here in DC. I'm just terrible. Anyhow,
Oh,
we
there
just
we go.
Wow,
Yeah.
you're
in,
cool.
we just brought in 55 arrangements from an event they had yesterday.
Oh, wow.
And this is the fridge now.
Wow.
Everyone can see. Anywho, this is what
Wow.
we do. And on behalf of those who don't have that connection, the accessibility is so important. And that is been the mission of Plants and Blooms Reimagined for
Well,
7 years now. So always wonderful to be a part of the Slow Flowers family. And again, thank you for your sharing your presentation.
oh, no, no. Thank you for speaking. I'm thrilled to hear there are people like you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Kaifa.
Thank you, Deborah.
So one more question I think we maybe will ask Holly from District 2 Floral Studio because it talks about the sustainable church flowers. And she has a question. Holly, you want to pop on the screen and ask your question of Shane? So I think he'll have lots to say.
God.
And if she's not able to get on throw, here she is. Hi, Holly.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Holly.
Hello. Thank you so much for all that you've been sharing with us. And Deborah, thank you as always for hosting these. I was just curious from your perspective, what you might suggest as a good starting point for having those conversations with local, like church dioceses to encourage practices for like going foam free, considering just like, even maybe just considering the foam free option. I'm not even talking about like painted stuff with the bleach stuff, but like
it's very difficult. I mean, the reason I was keen on being part of Sustainable Church Flowers was because I do believe that churches are one of the main users of foam and of imported flowers, because that's just how it has evolved to be, which is so extraordinary. You know, when you think in England, most of the churches that are in use daily are at least 400 years old. Some of them are Norman, some of them are, you know, and for people then say, but this is how we've always done it, always made me very angry, because that isn't how they've always done it. Sorry, you know, maybe you've done it since 1970 this way. And so that was why it was, I felt that if churches of all places of worship, I would rather it was, instead of Sustainable Church Flowers, I would rather it was called Sustainable Places of Worship Flowers, but that's too much to just get into one sentence.
Right.
So if we could change that, I thought that was a good thing. And unfortunately, the resistance isn't from the churches, it's from the church flower groups, who, I don't know about America, but certainly in England, so many of them are members of NAFAS. You probably have AIFD. So many of them they're competitive florists. They don't earn their living from flowers. They just compete, and they do it as this some sort of odd hobby where they sort of design, in inverted commas. There was one of the NAFAS ladies who said to me, I only put flowers in water, I'm not a designer. And I looked at what she did and I thought, well, I'd rather have my fingers cut off than do what you do. But I didn't say that. I'd be glad to hear. And I think that is the problem in a lot of churches. It has evolved to become a sort of competitive thing almost.
Yeah.
And so I'm not answering your question. It is very hard, because quite a lot of the priests, clergy, they don't want to upset these mostly women who do it for free.
Yeah.
You know, that's the other big problem. These people are doing it for free. They don't want to be told what you've done for the past 35 years for free is no longer acceptable. And so it's very, very hard. To me, the biggest thing is that in churches in England, and probably in America too, that there is a huge drive to be more eco-friendly. And I always say that this is the easiest thing you can do. Giving up foam is so easy. And once you've said you've done it and gotten rid of all the boxes of foam you've been storing, you have no go back option. And then you start being really creative and inventive. And, you know, I try to sort of go on that very positive way, but I completely agree that it is oddly resistant, very oddly resistant. And those who convert love it. You know, they think this is wonderful. And we have an amazing priest on our board called Benji Tyler, and Benji has had sustainable flower festivals in his church. He's had, you know, Christmas, come and have Christmas drinks and do a sustainable wreath. I mean, he's really wonderfully inventive and encouraging. And I think it's all that positivity that is the approach, offering to do demonstrations for people, offering to do something to raise funds. I know it means give, but that is the way to get people interested. Whereas criticizing them and saying you're doing it wrong is not the way. Yeah. And I have to bite my tongue a lot.
And your Instagram feed, Sustainable Church Flowers, is a really great resource of inspiration too. Holly, have you seen that and followed that on Instagram? Yeah. Thank you for that.
We try to be much less judgy than some of the others, you know, because as soon as you're judgy, people are turned off. That's what I've discussed.
Yeah. All right. We're almost done with our hour, but can we squeeze in one more question?
course.
Okay, Sarah from Everbloom Fields has a great question. Sarah, are you available to jump on? And
I know Sarah, I think. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Shane. Good to see you again.
Oh, yeah, we have met, haven't we?
Yes. It was right before COVID shut everything down. And so then
in Dallas.
Yes. So then all the memories got blurred by
my memory's clear. Can I just say you were a savior. And I had said I was going to Dallas, and I'd said to the people who were organizing it, I would like to use local flowers. They said there are none. There are no local florists, flower growers. It doesn't exist in our climate. We've got this problem. We've got, you won't get it. And I found you through Ariella Shazar, who said, because I sent her a message, said, is that true? I knew she'd been in Texas, and she said, absolute rubbish. And that's how I found you. But it's amazing how people don't know. And do you still supply some of those places now in Dallas?
I do, but it's still quite amazing how many people in Dallas still think that there's no local flowers.
Right.
here.
We're so glad you're there.
It's such an entrenched message, which is why I appreciate your voice so much, and the voice of Deborah and everyone else that is working to move that message out.
Well, I don't feel it's been, I just feel it's so obvious. And how you people can't realize it or see it. But having said that, I met some of the floral designers in Dallas, and I can absolutely see how local isn't in their radar.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was your question? Sorry.
Well, it's a little bit, I'm not sure it's quite a question, but when we talk about the sustainability of florals, sometimes it's the dead of winter, and you can find some beautiful berries and beautiful sticks. And I just love that statement that you said earlier. If the azaleas had not been in bloom, there would have been something else.
Yeah.
Some beauty out there to find.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering just about the clarity of this message. Sometimes, should we simply just say it's the wrong season for abundant floral beauty, let us live with nature? Or should we say, let's go admire the berries? Or maybe it's both. Sometimes I wonder which message should I be answering?
It's really hard, because we aren't doing it just for ourselves. I mean, there are some people who just do flowers for photographs on Instagram. That's a different career. We're all doing it for clients. And sometimes even worse, for an event planner as well. And when the event planners come along with 25 pages of Pinterest and 43 images they've taken from Instagram and already shown the bloody client, and it's really hard then to say, let's look at berries. And building up client trust, the reason I could say that it didn't matter if the azaleas weren't in flowers, because I have, for better or for worse, the full trust of the king and queen, who wouldn't ever have been, they would have thought it very grand if they had demanded something. They don't behave like that. They trust, and they love nature, so they would have loved whatever had come along. And that is the hard bit to build up with clients, especially when there's an intermediary involved. I mean, I don't mind shaming people and say, well, the trouble with that idea is it's really unsustainable. And, the carbon footprint would be massive if we brought peonies from Australia. And so I'm not prepared to do it. I feel I'm old enough to be able to say that sort of thing. But if I were 24 and starting my business, I do see that's much harder. So it's a real hard one. All I can think I can do is to constantly, because social media seems to be the platform that most people use, to constantly post beautiful photographs of seasonal nature. To me, if you want to have a party in the winter, you want it to feel cozy. You don't want it to feel like summer. I mean, winter in our climates, not obviously winter in Australia. And that is the USP. You want to get people, but it's so hard. I do agree. Sarah, everyone thinks I must be immune to that. Nobody would dare ask me. We have it all the time. It is that everybody is bombarded with visuals. And you only have to turn on your phone, and you can Google anything. You can Google any hashtag, and you'll find 65 examples of wedding flowers, wedding bouquet.
Yeah.
And then it's like I mean, just as I hate going to big supermarkets or shopping malls because there's too much choice. So you're bewildered, and it's really hard. And then everything lacks individuality. So I do also, that's another argument, it would be so much more individual. It would be unique. It'd be so much more your style. It's getting that balance right. And it's true, if a client comes to you or to me or to lots of these people, they want your style. They haven't come to you because you're the cheapest or something, which is a terrible reason to do anything. You want to, it's really hard though. I know it's really, really hard. We send out proposals sometimes and we get these replies back saying, oh, it looks very autumnal. And you think, probably it's the 15th of October, maybe.
I love it. Oh, I'm so glad that you guys were able to reconnect, and how wonderful that Local Flowers came to the rescue when Shane was in Dallas.
But Sarah, I quote about that experience about meeting you in talks that I give, because when someone says there are none, you think, this is terrible. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Because the gardens that I was brought to cut from, they're so manicured, I couldn't have cut anything.
Lovely. So love that story. Yes. That is great.
Thank you.
Well, we're kind of at our close, and there were some questions that we maybe didn't get to, but I think Shane.
Is there anything you wanted to throw at me quickly that I could answer quickly?
Well, Carol, one flower. I would love to ask one more. Carol Carrier is a flower farmer in the Washington, D.C. area in Maryland, and she says, could Shane address if he is mentoring someone to come along with him to continue his philosophy of sustainable flowers and mechanics into the future? So she's looking at what can she say to encourage, I believe, people you're mentoring and people who are coming along to follow you. What advice do you have for people entering the profession?
Well, you only want to work with people who are as enthusiastic as you are. I find people who have been to flower college more difficult to work with personally than people who have come from a horticultural background. We particularly like people who have had horses in their childhood, because then they don't mind long hours and lifting heavy things and mucking out. And that always, if I were to trace back, my business has been going for 34 years. The best people who have ever worked with me have all had that can-do attitude. And if you say we have to start at 4 a.m. tomorrow morning, they'll say, I'll be there at 3:30 to make coffee. That's what you want. Yeah. And, I would say, what am I doing? I mean, I'm encouraging, I find younger people much more interesting than old people, to be honest. Yeah. And I'm encouraging everything about that. I try with the people who work for me. How can you do it? Show and realize that you have something to offer. By hanging around this long, you do have something to offer. and don't be afraid to be encouraging and full of praise. To sort of say, this is what I do, and I think what you're doing is amazing. I always mean it when I say it. Yeah. And, I learn so much from younger people as well, because sometimes they'll come up with an idea and you think, God, that's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that?
Well, I do notice, Shane, in social media, when you post your work, you're always tagging all of your team and praising their support of you. And I shining the light on others does not take away from you. I think that's really a lesson.
Not even slightly, and giving credit where credit's due, Yeah. And when you get to a certain age, you aren't the one up the ladder anymore. You're the one standing at the front pointing. And I think that's a joy as well. That is that has a great joy in it.
Oh, lovely. Well, those of you who will be meeting Shane in Seattle are in for a treat, but those of you who are elsewhere in the country, I'm glad you got to share an hour from this generous soul, this wonderful kindred brother in horticulture and floriculture. So thank you for your time today, Shane. Really, really wonderful. And hopefully people can also maybe take in your lecture at the Garden Museum. That's September 12th. It's coming right up.
I think it'd be fun. I mean, it's an extraordinary story of designing to tight briefs, but with incredible trust. It's magical. What happened in May was magical for me and my team.
Love it.
And I mean, the magic of people being willing to collaborate, but equally fitting within very tight. It's what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your time. We're going to wrap it up here, folks. We have 2 giveaways, as I said, and Nisha will draw from the names of people who have attended, and we'll let you know next week. But one person will be receiving a signed copy of A Year in Flowers, Shane's
Hope it's not me.
beautiful. Pardon?
I hope it's not me. I don't want to.
No, we won't give it to you. But the book with cherries on the cover, not tomatoes. And Shane will sign it when he's here, so you won't get it until October. And then we have a really special a gift from New Age Floral, one of our sponsors from the Slow Flower Summit, who has a Sustainable Floristry Starter Pack that we didn't give away at the summit. So we've held it aside to give it away and send it to someone today. So that's kind of cool. And then I will just mention that we are scheduled to come together again, second Friday of the month in October. It will be October 13th. We will do something very autumnal then, Shane. I don't know what it is, but thanks for that reminder of the seasons.
Yeah.
And we'll say goodbye to everybody. And the recording of this will be available. The edited version of this will be available next week. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.